Ladies and gentlemen, past international president, Pat Johnson.
Thanks, Michael, and thank you, everyone, and welcome to club officer training, or whatever we call it now. There's a new name for everything. What's old is new. So it's great to join you. As was mentioned, I am in Manitoba, and in District 64, where I started Toastmasters and where I grew up in Toastmasters for my first 6 years. And I'm actually on Monday night going back to the club that I belong to in Winnipeg, Skyliners 831. So I'm going back to visit. So I haven't had any Toastmasters fixes for a couple of weeks, about 3 weeks. So it's I'm due. So first of all, I just want to acknowledge Michael as our program quality director in organizing this, and Carolyn for her work, and also our district director, Sean Gold, who I know is in Kamloops at the moment and joining us via camera. And I think our club growth director, also Jan Ireland. So I just want to acknowledge the district team, and of course all the leaders throughout the district who are there to support us. So what's going to happen today? As was mentioned, Michael mentioned that this became a discussion of possibility after we did an hour's session at the conference in the spring in Langley, and talking about how many things that there were actually to discuss, and how we could, with the right will and desire, turn our clubs around if they weren't already distinguished, or if they were distinguished, to make them presidents distinguished. And so one of the things that I bring to this, of course, is many years of looking at clubs being successful or unsuccessful. The other thing is that people often say to me, oh, we don't do the distinguished club plan, we're a great club. And I go, well, it's your report card. It's not your marching orders, but it's your report card, and it's what advertises you to the world. Because when people ask me, and people ask me quite frequently, and clubs to them in any part of the world, the first thing I do is pull up the dashboard that I believe you have in front of you, and I look down and I look for who's had new members and who's got education achievements, because I want to know that the club is thriving. And based on those numbers, and perhaps people that I know might be in that club, I refer potential new members. So just be aware that the DCP results and how your club performs becomes your calling card. It becomes your business card to members who are looking for clubs. Just as those potential members who are walking down the street and walk into your meeting, what they see that week is what they buy or don't buy for a training opportunity. And they are looking for an education program to be involved in. None of us, I believe, came to Toastmasters looking for another family or friends to hang out with or a place to go on Tuesday nights. We came looking for education to build some skills, and that's really something that's important to remember, that Toastmasters is an education organization. That is the only thing that's listed on our incorporation papers or our charter papers in the state of California where we were formed. That's the only reason Ralph Smedley formed us, was to teach skills to people who needed the skills to be successful in life. So we're not a service club. We might provide service to our members, but that's the verb, that's not the noun. So we're not a service club, and we're definitely not a group of volunteers. We're leaders in training, we're communicators in training. but we may volunteer as students, just as we would if we were in university, volunteer to be on a project or to lead a project, but we are students first and foremost. And when we keep that in mind, it changes our approach to Toastmasters. And I show up, I've been showing up in Toastmasters a lot of years, as some of you have, and some of you for a very short period of time. But we come as students to learn from one another. And those that want to give back and are just there not to learn but to give back, there are no instructors or teachers in Toastmasters. That's why we have mentoring, so that students mentor one another and support one another. And then we have leaders in training who are taking on leadership skills. So that's a bit of where I come from in this whole approach to how can we build vibrant clubs. And so I'm going to go through, we're going to, first of all, we're going to do some basic steps to have a look at this, and looking at the status of your club. And if you're an area director, you might want to look at the status of your clubs in your area or your division, or if you're a member of a club and you're there as an officer, to look at your club. And we're going to look at where the gaps are based on what would have you be President's Distinguished. And then looking at what do you need to fill that gap, and we'll spend some time, and you're going to work with one another. And then we're going to diagnose what might be going wrong and have a look at some of the common pitfalls and where we let one another down in our clubs. And then we'll also provide, probably at that time, we'll have a Q&A session so that if there's questions, we can catch up. In the meantime, if there's a burning question and you're stuck, feel free to contact whoever's there facilitating, and they can stop me and we can deal with the questions if you're stuck somewhere and you can't move on. And then we want to ultimately build an action plan. And the action plan that we're going to build today is not going to be built the way you build your action plans, or most of you would build your action plans, but we're going to build them from the envisioned future, what you actually want to create and what you want to celebrate. And it's a way of building action plans that I use in my coaching business with my clients. And we start from the power of, as Stephen Covey said, to begin with the end in mind. And so we want to envision what the end is and then build an action plan to get us there. So that's roughly where we're going to go today. And so I hope that that sounds of interest to you. If not, we're going to do it anyway. Okay, so let's start with looking at the status of your club, and maybe talk to the people next to you. Find a partner, or find a couple people. And I don't know if you're sitting in your club groups, but find somebody to talk to and look at the dashboard and find out where your club has not met the requirements to be President's Distinguished. And let's just articulate what those are, just so you get a clear place of where we're starting from. So I'm going to give you I'll give you a bit of time to do that, maybe 5 minutes or so on my clock here to actually assess your club. Okay, so I'm assuming that you got some gaps identified where your club has either been President's Distinguished on an ongoing basis, particularly this year we could look at, and what's lacking. And I've just, I've pulled up in front of me a club, looking at it, and in terms of the dashboard, and I see, we can very quickly see that we look at the administrative part and we see that dues renewal and officers list, and then we look at club officers training, and we'll talk about some of these difficulties that we run into and the challenges, and from there you can give some ideas of where your gaps are, that is some things that you might look at doing differently. Looking at new members also, that we might need to be growing our clubs and having that new exciting member there. And what are some of the things that come up for us when we think of, or the excuses that we don't want to have new members, or what kind of environment do we create? And then we have the beautiful education program, and as we know this year that we're got 1 foot in levels, and we've got 1 foot in competent communicator and leader, etc. So we've got that combination going on until next year. So let's have a look at what goes on. So how many of you, just so you can show one another, because I won't be able to see you all, but how many of you have at least a distinguished club this year? Raise your hands if you belong to a distinguished club. Okay, great. So we've got some success. The other component that is when we look at distinguished, because we see this often, is that we say, oh, we're doing really good education-wise, but we don't meet the membership. And one of the things to really look at, and if I could just take sideways for a moment to look at the core values of Toastmasters International and what they mean. And so the core values are integrity, respect, service, and excellence. So that's integrity, respect, service, and excellence. So those are the cornerstones of any club that is created. And when we look at our education program through integrity, what is integrity? Well, integrity, the definition of integrity that I use in life is when my intentions and my actions and my thoughts all align. So my intentions, thoughts, and actions, and then my results follow with that. And that creates integrity. I can put that framework on anything I do, whether it's having a conversation with somebody, whether that's dealing with a conflict, whether that's meeting standards of something that I've promised to do. And so we can look at that. And some people say, well, integrity is what you do when nobody's watching. Well, we have self-integrity. It applies to ourselves as well as others. So any relationship that we have. So when we look through that lens of our core values in Toastmasters, it asks us to have integrity with the Toastmaster program. So to talk very plainly, when I look and I say, is your club in integrity with the Toastmaster program? And the Toastmaster program, when we charter a club and when we do the Toastmaster promise and join Toastmasters, we promise a lot of things. And so my question is, are you in integrity with your promise to yourself and to Toastmasters International, to your area, to your club, to your division? And if your club is below 20 members, which is the bare minimum, because it says that's the minimum, then I would boldly say that you're out of integrity as a club with the program. So looking at what can we do to be in integrity, to comply with the Toastmasters standards. So it requires to be a Toastmaster club. It's what we're required to do is meet at least 12 times a year, that we must have prepared speeches and oral evaluations. So if your club is going, oh, we don't do manual speeches, you are not a Toastmaster club in integrity. You're out of integrity with what you said you would do to deliver the program to the customers that will walk in your door. And so that affects your excellence, and it also affects the service, the respect that you have for the people that are in the program who came to learn, as well as the integrity of what we said we would do when we chartered our clubs. And that we agree when we do the Toastmaster promise. So let's look at some of the gaps. And I believe that you were given a club coach troubleshooting guide. Everybody got a copy of that. Now, let's imagine, because we all belong to a club, let's imagine that we all take responsibility for our club. And Lance Miller, a past world champion who was involved in creating a very successful club down in California, really talks about every member owning their club. And what might happen differently in your club if one person wasn't responsible for it, but that every member was responsible for it, that every member took action to look after that club, that you walked in and looked around and saw as a member that something didn't happen. And you didn't have to go and tell the sergeant at arms that the banner wasn't up, but you walked over, got the banner, and put it up. Or that there was maybe difficulty or the Toastmaster was running late. So you volunteered, you stepped forward as a leader in training and took over the meeting until they arrived. Whatever it might be, big or small, but owning it. So personally, I feel like I own the results and the successes, the shortcomings of the club that I belong to, because we look at our club as everybody is responsible. Everybody owns our club. Every member that is inducted into our club becomes an owner, a co-owner, and responsible for the well-being of that club. So it's not on the backs of the executive committee. You as the executive committee are the leaders of that strategic plan and the action plan to make that club successful. You are the student in terms of how do we build a strategic plan? How do we build a plan and enroll people in that plan? How do we make sure that our students are learning? How do we create a rich learning environment? So all of those things happen as we are students and owning the success or challenges of our club. So a couple of things I want to talk a bit about some philosophies and some places to look. And these are things that I've looked at for many years because of being, I've visited Toastmasters clubs around the world, and while we all think that we're unique, actually we're very similar. And so while I give examples or talk about issues, it may or may not have been in North America, but they're alive and well and existing. So my first question is, when you walk into your meeting room, and one of the things that happens is intuitive, and we want to act counterintuitively. When clubs get small, we usually see them move to a smaller facility. And my question is, do you have empty seats at every meeting? Because psychologically, you're notifying everybody that's at your meeting that we have room to grow, that we're not full. And if I walk in as a guest and there's no empty seats, it doesn't feel very welcoming. It doesn't feel like there's room for me there. So remember all the time what it felt like for you when you arrived at your first meeting. And for me, that was the hardest meeting I ever went to. I don't know about you, but it took me 8 months to get in the door when I went to my first one. So I didn't want to be rejected. I feared I would be. So make sure that there's empty seats. Make sure that your room is big enough to expand your club, so that you're giving the message that we're not full, we have lots of room, and as a guest, you're welcome. Remember at all times, and this requires sometimes a bit of a shift for us that think of us as other than education, that we're an education program only. That's all we are. I mean, it's huge and it's magnificent, but that's what we are. And everybody that walks into our door is coming to learn something. They're not coming for a place to hang out and have coffee. They're coming because they want to learn, and that they've heard that this is the place for communication and leadership. In my experience, most people that are coming want some communication, and what's really lacking is listening and thinking skills. And people are fascinated by that, and certainly it meets a need that is hard to find in the community of learning. So communication skills and leadership skills. So make sure that you promote the program for what we actually teach, and be prepared for that. We really need to stay relevant. Sometimes when we're in Toastmasters for a long time, or a short time even, and we get bored, and we say, well, I'm going to take a break, I'm not doing any speeches. How many of you are currently in Pathways? Fantastic, great. So you are in a position where you can actually mentor a new member. You can support them, and if you're not there yourself, then you can't support anyone. And that a lot of what you think you're going to mentor on may not be relevant because you don't understand the projects, or you haven't had a look at the projects. So I encourage you as a leader to lead the way. And yes, it is uncomfortable, but there's thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of people now who have got into Pathways and made it all the way through, and we've even got DTMs already from Pathways in the world. So people have survived. And I know sometimes it feels like we're stuck, and I got stuck and had to call a guide to actually help me get unstuck, because it's new and unfamiliar. And just for those of you that aren't aware, there are printed manuals for Pathways. So for those of members in your club that are saying, I'm never going to Pathways online, remind your members that there are manuals that they can order. And we purposely did it because the world of Toastmasters is not all on bandwidth enough to do Pathways online. So as a leader, be aware of the resources available to you. How many of you used the Toastmasters promise for your induction ceremony of new members? Use the Toastmaster promise. Members actually sign that if they're signing an application form when we're submitting application. There's the Toastmaster promise is something really valuable to bring to your club and go through it, because we all agree to it when we sign up as members. And we make a lot of promises there, and it's part of our integrity with ourselves and with our club. And it talks about inviting people to come to Toastmasters, talks about always being prepared to the best of our abilities, and you can define what that is. But so it's looking at those resources that we have, and it sets a standard for new members to know what they're actually expecting in terms of excellence of the education program that they came looking for. I mentioned this before, but the Distinguished Club Plan is how we learn how to do strategic planning. It is guided. Absolutely, they give us an outline, but if you ever did strategic planning, you look at where you are and you can do what are your strengths and weaknesses and opportunities, where you currently are, and looking at where do we want to be in 1 year's time, and maybe perhaps 3 years and 5 years time if you've got a continuous growth program. So if you're at 10 members, you may have a 2-year strategic plan that you want to build, and to build some continuity for your club to keep working on. So build your distinguished club plan and know that it's, again, as a student, it's an education program to help you do strategic planning and put actions to it. And it forces you to talk to your members if you're determining, and asks them to set goals, because you're determining who's going to reach the education achievements. And it hugely informs your vice president of education. So everything in the Toastmasters program over the past 95 years or more has been built back, and it loops through, and it all supports other behaviors and results that we're looking for. A number of years ago, one of the past district governor from New Zealand said to me when I was district governor of 21, he said, "Do you have any clubs that are in trouble?" And of course, I laughed, because every district has the opportunities for improvement. And he said, "We often look at, oh, are they meeting in the right location? Do they meet at the right time?" And he said, "We spend a lot of time moving clubs to different locations and trying to fix the external things." And he said, "I would suggest that the very first thing you do is look to see who the problem person is in the club. Find the problem person in the club." And he said, "It may be you." So what makes you the problem person in the club? Well, if you need to do everything for the club, and you have this, what I would call, dysfunctional relationship, where Pat is the boss of everything and nobody does anything without asking Pat, then Pat is the problem in the club. Because in essence, she's taking the learning experiences away from the other members who signed up to learn. I actually left a club a number of years ago now, because I felt like I was the problem person in the club. And how I identified that was, we had a beautiful club and I loved it. And I was the sergeant at arms, but I was also the end of almost every sentence in the club. So people would say, "Should we have a special event?" And the response was, "Let's talk to Pat about it." "Should we adjourn for 2 weeks in the summer?" "Well, let's talk to Pat." "We want to have a special meeting." "Let's talk to Pat." When is club officer training? "Well, let's ask Pat." And that's not what Toastmasters is about. It's not my program. It's every member owning that club. And so I actually took a leave of absence for 6 months, and the club was not happy with me, but I explained to them why I was. And I said, "You will actually be stronger as members and a club when I'm not here, because you already know all of these things. And you just have to trust yourself and know somebody else besides Pat to call." And that club today is still in existence and is still perking along and provides service to their members. And I never did go back as a member to it. But those members went on, and lots of them took on area and division roles and thrived. So we don't need to keep our students as children. We need to let them grow up and experience the whole of the Toastmasters program at the area and the division, at the region and the international level. So make sure that you expose your people, and don't be the, "I've got it handled." And don't raise your hand for everything. Ask somebody to come along, or ask somebody to take it on. So really look for the person that's a problem in the club, Sometimes we have bullies in clubs and nobody wants to deal with them, but even find somebody in your club who's a strong personality and that agrees to take that on. Or you might have somebody that always comes up with an inappropriate joke and embarrasses you if you've got guests, or embarrasses or makes uncomfortable the rest of the members. Clean it up. Make a simple phone call to them outside of that and clean it up so it doesn't keep happening, because you're now affecting the quality of the product that we've agreed to deliver and be involved in. So don't be afraid to take those on as leadership opportunities. And don't let someone be a problem that destroys your club. And don't you be the person that knows all the answers. Be the student also. Some of the problem people that we run across, and I've certainly encountered these, is people that say, I'm not doing the program. And I'm sorry, but why are you in Toastmasters if you're not doing the program? Well, I don't like this part of it. So my response is, then don't pay tuition to take this program. If it doesn't meet your needs, you need to go to the community college, or you need to go to the university, or you need to go online and find a program that meets your needs. But don't come to Toastmasters and complain that you don't like the program, because you've paid to join the program. You've agreed to take the program. It's just like if you sign up and pay tuition at university. So just really keep that in mind. You're not obligated to show up. If you don't like what's going on, leave. So there's no locked doors when it comes to leaving. And that also applies to when we beg people to stay. Let people leave when they're ready to go. It's just a natural thing. I was on an advisory committee at the University of Victoria for many, many years. And we never talked about locking doors so students couldn't leave. Our goal was to graduate people, to have people come back for the next program that they wanted to take because they had a great experience. So really, don't get so wrapped up in retention. Retention is a symptom of many things. If you have excellence and you have respect and you have integrity and you have service in your club, retention will not be an issue. People will come, they will get what they need, and then they will leave the program happy graduates, and they'll come back and they need more skills. So really look at the pressure that you put on members and make sure that you've got happy students in your program. So let's just leave that in terms of looking at difficulties and difficult people. But don't be afraid to take on the conflict. If there's conflict, take it out of the club environment and deal with it, and see it as an educational opportunity, as your club will benefit from it. And then just one last word, make sure that you vote in your members so you can vote those members out. And there is, I've been in this process, I've done this process before, and it's not easy necessarily. I think it's easier now than it used to be. And it's not necessarily comfortable, but it'll be more comfortable the second time you have to do it. So take it on and talk to the person ahead of time, and maybe they'll leave. Maybe it's just not a good fit for them now. So I'll leave you with those thoughts regarding difficult people in your club. Okay. So let's look at the Club Coach troubleshooting guide. And this is a brilliant diagnostic tool to use. And the things I've talked about address a lot of these items. But what I love about this is it helps us as club members when we've got this assessment of our clubs going, wow, my club is not distinguished. Where are our problem areas or our opportunities for growth? When we, in the Club Coach, it actually gives us an opportunity to assess our club. Are we 5 or 1? And on that continuum, and you get to practice being really honest about this, because you don't need to show it to anyone. And we're not going to walk through it all today, but you can take it away and use it as a diagnostic tool with perhaps your club executive. But you'll look at the first one, for example, that members sincerely want their club to be successful versus they don't seem to care whether their club succeeds or fails. This is part of education as well, so that the new members actually understand that there's a distinguished plan, that we're meeting objectives, that there's objectives for all our assignments, etc. And again, that each member owns the club and is responsible for their learning environment. And then you'll see below it that there's a corrective action. So as an executive member, you have an opportunity to enroll people or inspire people how great your club could be. Maybe even having some clubs really thrive on competition. Maybe you find a friendly competition amongst some other clubs, or find one other club that is similar in makeup to yours, and you have a challenge amongst one another, and all the members get together. So it's many ways to look at that. When we look at the second one, members are willing to work together to solve problems, and then personality conflicts and bickering, barriers to problem solving. And when I look at conflict in clubs, it's always interesting to look below the conflict, look inside of it, and what's actually going on. So it might be a power struggle, somebody needing to have it their way. Might be somebody that, well, the bottom line is that it's fear-based, because conflict is always fear-based. So somebody's afraid of something, whether they're going to lose control, or somebody's going to try and control them, or they won't show up the way they want to, or that they won't be excellent, or that perfection is at risk if perfection is their goal. So all of those things create conflict, and often it's control in a Toastmaster club that causes conflict. So it has to be my way or the highway, those types of things. So looking at having conversations around conflict and looking at getting people to buy into a common goal. Looking at the third one is about enthusiasm. And, I really invite people to leave Toastmasters if they've got a negative attitude about it. It's, we talk about people that go to jobs and we say, wow, if you don't like your job, apply for another one. Look at how can you change it? How can you make it different? And so look at what can you do to change your club so that you're happy there, and or is there someplace else you need to be, or do they need to leave? And we also outgrow clubs. So sometimes we are not getting our needs met at our club, and we need to change clubs. So if you're the person that is the most accomplished in your club, if nobody challenges you, if you're getting evaluations that say, gee, I can't think of a thing that you could be any better, or, oh, I'm so intimidated, I can't evaluate Pat, then it's time that Pat moved to a new club. So be aware that your own learning requires that you may have to change your environment, may need to go somewhere else. Don't be afraid to do that. I've outgrown clubs, and I always say it's good to be a little frightened when you get up in your club. They're going to challenge you. They're going to challenge me. So racking up DTMs is not the goal. The goal is to keep improving. So you want to be in an environment where you're achieving and being asked to step forward to be your highest and best. So I'll leave this form with you to look at. It talks about the meeting place, and it then goes on of how the meetings are run, and really looking at, that's our education program. So looking at that excellence of product that we have. And we only have many times only one opportunity to let the guests know what kind of an education program we deliver and what they could hope to achieve. So make sure that there's no dress rehearsals actually for Toastmasters. And we say, oh, we're going to do a demonstration meeting, or we're going to have an open house. I would suggest that you have an open house every week that you meet, because somebody can walk in the door and observe how you run your meeting. So that is your reputation right there every week. So that's a challenge to step up to. Looking at creativity in terms of meetings, look at what other clubs do. If it's dull, then how can you switch it up and find different ways? There's so many ideas out there. Get on District 21's website and ask members to submit different ideas for meetings. If you're looking for a variety of meeting ideas, reach out. Be prepared. So it talks about down below the halfway part, it talks about being involved. So each of your students and you also need to be prepared for your roles. Don't walk in and brag that you're just doing this off the cuff. That's actually disrespectful for the participants, unless that's what the assignment is. But it's kind of saying, oh, I didn't care to prepare for you, and so we'll just pick it up as we go. And it's also disrespectful for your learning opportunity, because when we put the effort in, that's where we learn. Ask people to work the program, because the program works. And like Helen Blanchard, our first woman international president, said that if you get everything out of Toastmasters that there is to get, nobody will get out of Toastmasters. So if we actually get all the things that we can learn out of the Toastmasters program, we'll never run out of learning opportunities. And that's certainly been my experience. When I'm curious and I come looking to learn, there's always something to learn. So it's an attitude towards that. Expect greatness from your speakers and your evaluators. And imagine if every one of those speeches was going to the community or was going to a contest. How would you ask them to step up and improve, right? On the second page of that troubleshooting guide, it talks about using the club success plan and the distinguished club program. And it talks about guests, inviting guests and treating them well, because they might never come back again. They might only come to one meeting and never go back. And I've met people that have come back to Toastmasters like 10 years later, and I'll say, oh, is this your first Toastmaster meeting? And they'll go, no, I went to a meeting 10 years ago. And I'll go, why didn't you stay? Well, I was the best speaker in the room, so I didn't feel like I could learn anything from the group. Or they were so disorganized, I would learn nothing from them. So we're always having open house. So treat our customers that walk in the door with kindness and generosity and a good introduction to the education program that they can have. You know, we're a franchise. You're running a franchise. Another thing to think about is, if you have a specific target, do you target a specific sector of your population in your club? So if there's more than one club in your community, what differentiates you from that other club? So I know sometimes we say, well, we have an evening club and we have a morning club, or we have a noon hour club and we have an evening club. So it meets the various people's needs. There may be some different niches that you look at. What about if your club is already attracting young professionals and your location is where young professionals have easy access to you? What about saying we're the club that that educates young professionals? Or what if you're meeting already in a facility like a community center? Are there clubs, are there people that normally come into that center that you say, wow, we've got a target market that we're not accessing? So there might already be seniors groups that are organized in that community center, or there might be new mom club that already meets that you could promote yourself to. So there's many places to look for new members if we think outside the box. Okay, so use the Club Coach Troubleshooting Guide to assess your club in all those areas and look at more specifically what you can do to improve your club. So let's take some time and look at any questions you might have at this point.
In reference to the manuals, right?
Yeah. It says all members are expected to speak the manuals.
Yep.
I agree with that. But the other end of the thing says members present non-manual speeches. I don't have a problem with occasionally having a non-manual speech given if it's good quality. And I think that would help clubs occasionally bring in somebody that's got the outside that has a really good speech to demonstrate the quality of the club. So I'm just saying, you need to have some exceptions to that.
Well, I will respectfully disagree with you.
Okay.
I believe that if you want to have a Toastmaster who's a student of our program in and demonstrate, I think that's another issue. But why would we bring people in off the street to show us how to run our program and be the example? Then I would, it's counterintuitive to me. I think that it's an opportunity for people to prepare a great speech and go somewhere else and perhaps demonstrate it. But I'm not a fan, and I'm not a supporter of bringing people off the street to speak at our Toastmasters program when we are actually teaching. I think we ask guests from within the Toastmaster program, and then they're working the program as well. Part of manual speeches is not about the speaker only, because remember, everything in the Toastmaster program supports all the people in the program. When I get up to prepare a speech, I'm actually providing an opportunity for all our audience members to practice their listening skills and their critical thinking skills. They're not passive participants, they're actually active participants. Listening and thinking skills are being developed. And
yeah, so, I agree with all that. I'm just saying, I go and listen to lots of speeches everywhere in Penticton. And occasionally I see a really good speaker that's not a Toastmaster, but he's got skills based on some program he's taking that you can get a bit of different perspective of how he gives speeches. But that's only on the exception.
Yeah, and I, one of the things that I look at in Toastmasters is when we set precedents, then how it becomes the habit soon. So I just a word of caution, how often it happens, and then if somebody says, oh, that's a good idea, and away we go, and then we start to unravel. So and the other reality is that if you've got your full membership, you don't have time. You're meeting the needs, the education needs of your students in the program. So
I had another question to go with it, but I'm done.
Okay.
Thanks for your answer.
Okay.
Okay, you don't have did you say you had another question?
Yeah, we got a question here from Kamloops. Hang on. Can we get
Okay, got a question in Kamloops.
Can you hear us okay?
Yep.
I'm just looking at the one troubleshooting metric that says all members are expected to speak from manuals versus members frequently present non-manual speeches. And I'm just trying to understand if that's referring to prepared speeches that you've signed up for, or maybe table topics. Is there a differentiator between manual and non-manual to clarify that?
Well, the speeches are talking about being involved in the program. So you're doing quiz, TAS, and the assignments, or you're doing the traditional program and you're doing the prepared, the assignments there. So it must be a manual speech, just as is the requirement when we meet as a Toastmasters, that there must be manual speeches and oral evaluations. That's not referring to impromptu speaking.
It's more if somebody is choosing to speak, but they aren't following a path.
Yeah, it's like, sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, sorry. I think I was just clarifying that you were saying our speakers should be expected to be doing a speech, a manual speech, because they're following the path, versus just getting up to practice to speech without being active in the program.
Yes, because guess why you don't meet your educational achievements?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for your question. It all ties together. If we're not tracking, if we're using our time when we meet, and we're allowing non-Toastmasters to speak, and or we're not doing the program, we're not going to achieve our education programs. And now you've set the precedent for our new members not to follow the program either. And so why are we doing, as students, why don't we follow the program? And the program takes us step by step through the learning. And so, you know, like I said, if you don't like the program, then it's great. That's fabulous. But this program has assignments to be completed so that the club also can be a great learning environment, and we set the precedent. So it's a slippery slope. And what I've learned years ago is that every speech can be fit into a manual. People say, oh, that doesn't fit in. It doesn't fit in the program. Oh, yes, it does. You can find a place where it, and it's to create the environment that we are an exceptional club and we follow the program, and as a result, we're President's Distinguished. Our calling card is that we expect high performance from our students. We're the best school in town for communication and leadership. So watch the slippery slope when we go away from doing prepared speeches, because in our Toastmaster promise, we say that we will prepare for each assignment fully to the best of our ability, and we will prepare manual speeches and comply with all the rules and guidelines, etc. So I don't have the Toastmaster promise printed out for you, but it's a good reference for you to pull out. Look at that. Any other questions about this guide?
Pat Winiger, Armstrong 2645. As Sergeant at Arms, I'm always challenged to have our room look like it can grow its membership. The tables are the biggest obstacle. Is it common in clubs, you've been to many clubs, where they don't have to sit at a table, they can sit in rows of chairs? Thank you.
It's very common. It's very common. It's a very North American culture of having to have tables. I've been at, many clubs where people go in and sit down in classroom style with no tables. Or theater style, I mean. And people hold their materials on their laps. Yeah, some of the most successful clubs has nothing to do with the success of the club. So I've been in clubs that have got 80, 90 people in attendance and they don't have a table. They're all just sitting in theater style, working on their laps. And you know what we do? We automatically go and buy ourselves a clipboard, or we have a binder with us, and we adapt this. We do the same thing when we go to speech contests. So it's a very, at this moment, North American culture that I see. Easy to change. We used to have, we had overflow in our club for a while because we had set tables, and we had chairs that we set up on the back. Even some people actually preferred to not sit at the table, but to sit at the second tier where there were no tables. So, yeah, don't let that be a barrier for growing your. Just make sure there's lots of empty chairs for people to fill up. Better to have empty chairs than tables.
Thank you,
Any other
Pat.
questions? Any other questions?
Hi, Pat. It's Marion from Kelowna.
Hi, Marion.
How are you?
Excellent.
Good. We're so glad you're here today, first of all.
Thanks.
And my question, or what I would like for you to just comment a little further on, would be how important it is to have executive meetings and the role of the president in keeping the executive accountable and keeping each other accountable. Could you comment on that a little bit, please, for us?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Marion, for that question. I think it's non-negotiable to have executive meetings. If we look at, again, the fact that we're students, and if you're on an executive, it's like practicing being on an executive team at work or in your community club. And how do you learn to be a leader? If you're on the executive, it's to get together and plan. You're planning how to lead the team. And there's issues that come up to anticipate and prepare for. It's a great place to be mentored in your leadership when you're on the executive. And you know, it's when we have executive, to get together and look at the strategic plan, to put the action plan in each month, to make announcements at the club so that the club membership stays informed of what's happening. Find a way to post your executive meeting minutes so that members recognize right away that they can take on leadership roles in the future, that they can get elected, so that you actually have contests, that you have an election for your executive, that people want to be in leadership positions and have the learning that's involved. So absolutely mandatory in my way of thinking to have an executive meeting every month and plan. The other thing that to be really aware of when you come to executive and electing executive, that people don't have to be long in the tooth in Toastmasters to be on the executive. Ideally, if you can have a nice mix of newer members that are interested in leadership development, and maybe one or two that have experience, so that they can guide and create continuity for the executive. But a number of years ago, our club grew to over 50 members, and we were just burning, and we had an amazing president and an executive that had to work really hard every month to keep this club thriving the way it was thriving. It was a lot of work to keep it going. And what we did then the next year, so we started halfway through the year, we said, who's our next president? And so we started looking at succession planning and identifying potentials. And one of our new members raised his hand, and at that time he was really new in Toastmasters, and he said he owned a company, a couple of companies, he did business internationally, he was educated, he spoke 6 languages, he was a rock star, but he was a brand new Toastmaster. And he said, I'm interested in being on the executive, I want to develop my leadership skills. And so he started shadowing the president a number of months ahead of time, like shortly after he was in the club. And when we had the club elections 6 months later, he ran for president, and he was a 6-month Toastmaster elected president. And he was an exceptional president because he had shadowed, he'd asked permission to show up at the executive meetings, which of course anybody can go to the executive meetings. And he showed up there, and he asked me to mentor him in terms of how do I be president? What are all the things I need to know every month? And so as soon as we had our May executive meeting, he would call me the next week and we would plan for the month of June or July. So we were always planning ahead because the May meeting would have dealt with June. And so we were always planning ahead. So he just, he put the effort in. He got a mentor. He stayed in regular contact with the executive outside of the executive meeting. And we had another phenomenal year. So watch when you look around for executive members that you don't pick the same tired people that have carried the club, but pick somebody new and mentor them. Get out of their way and let them fly, and know that there's different ways to do it. There's not just one way. So absolutely. The president is the cheerleader, the head cheerleader, the chief entertainment officer or excitement officer, you could call them, and they need to lead and ask the executive to be their highest and best and expect that of the club and be a worthy role model. So yeah, executive meetings are mandatory to keep a club going and thriving and on focus, and making sure that all the information is disseminated also, because now you've got area and division directors in contact. All that needs to trickle down to our membership. So, yeah.
Pat, we have another question from Kamloops.
Okay.
Hi, Jan.
Hi, Jan.
You talked about us learning from people in other clubs, and you're talking now about executive. Would you like to make a comment or two about area council? Within the realm of this?
Sure. I'm not sure how often area council meetings happen, but I'm a huge fan and supporter of them, and I would suggest that if you are the president or the EdPP club, that you ask your area director to have area council meetings. It's a challenge and a leadership opportunity for area directors to get their team together, and likewise for the division directors. So I mentored a division director last year who had division director meetings or division council meetings, and that was a great way both to bring training and awareness and education to those leaders that could then in fact take it back to their clubs. So look at the hierarchy. And years ago when I was on the district team, and some of you were also at that time, but we had area and division council meetings. And I think that they've largely gone away. And I think that's a real failing. We're going to build the district strong. We have to have the foundational pieces in. And that means that the area and the divisions need to be strong also, or the district doesn't exist, because the member and the club have to be powerful for the district to be powerful, because they just represent what we're doing. But their results are because of what we do or don't do. So yes, step up as leaders if you're an area director or a division director, and have those council meetings. And if you're president or VP, go and demand that they're worthwhile. Bring ideas and make sure that they're of value.
If I could just ask a question, so everyone is clear on what the makeup is of an area council. I think you just said it's presidents and vice presidents of clubs meeting together with, say, the area director to strategize amongst themselves and to share their ideas.
Yeah. The other thing to keep in mind, and nobody's excluded from them. So if I was just a member and I wanted to go, why wouldn't I be able to go? The other thing is, think of the goodwill it builds when you go to put on an area contest or a division contest, or you're hosting the district event. All of it, everything in Toastmasters is about relationship building, and the more people you know, the better, the more powerful you're going to be when you go to do something. Be able to call people, to know people who, what their skills are and what their strengths are, and how they show up. So absolutely, give people that component of their leadership development, because as a club president or ed VP, where do you get your leadership training? You might have a mentor somewhere, which I think you absolutely should have, ideally from a club that's better than yours, and even outside your area or division. And yeah, to get together at the area council is like going to club officer training on steroids, because now you can talk about what's going on in your area and strength, and how do you support one another and share ideas and strategically plan together to be a distinguished area or division. Yeah. What we want to do now is spend the next about 35, 40 minutes that we have left looking at a plan to actually build a vibrant club. And this is again what I spoke about at the very beginning in terms of how we build a plan. And what we know is Albert Einstein was quoted as having said that insanity, the definition of insanity, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And I see that we do that often in our lives, and in this specific situation in our Toastmaster clubs. So if I say to people, oh, have you got 20 members? And they go, no, we haven't. And I'll say, how many new members have you got this year? And they say, well, we don't have any. And I ask them what they've done, and they maybe had an open house. I said, have you ever done an open house before? Yes. How successful was it? Well, it's never worked. Then why are you doing more open houses if open houses don't work for you? Some people say, oh, we're going to run Speechcraft to build our membership. My question is, how many members have you got in the past from running Speechcraft? Because they're a lot of work. And it says in the Toastmaster promise that every member agrees to when they become a member, it says that we will invite other people to visit so that they can enjoy the benefits of Toastmasters International. So we'll invite other people to join the organization, is a promise that we make when we join. So it brings it back to, again, the basic concepts of everybody is responsible for our club, and the leaders, as we lead them, need to reinforce that. So we want to build a project plan, and we'll start it today, and hopefully some of you will actually get it done, because I know some of you have started this before. And take it back. I encourage you to take it back to your club executive and say, let's have a look at this. How do we want to do things differently? And this process is to get us out of the rut. When we, for example, how many of you edit papers or write something and then edit your own writing? Anybody edit your own writing? Yeah, so what do you do? What's the most common thing that people say if you're going to edit something of your own? For me, I've been told, start at the end, read backwards. Because our eyes, and we've all been exposed to these tricks where our eyes read what we think should be there and we skip over because our brain is already anticipated. And that's why when they show us examples on internet that here's a letter written and all the nouns or all the vowels have been taken out of the word, and yet we can read the meaning of the letter. Right? Anybody have that experience? take all the vowels out and we still know what what they're writing about. So that's because our brain is so trained to know what it is. And we don't want that to happen so that we keep doing the same thing by rote in our club. So we want to think outside the box. We want to break down that rut that we might be in or our club is in and look at things differently. So the number one, so this plan gets us to start with the end in mind, as Stephen Covey talks about the power of that. And so what we want to do is, number one is to write down what you're intending to produce. What do you actually want to produce in the next year? And I gave an example: to be a distinguished Toastmaster club or more, you might want to be a select or president's distinguished. You might want to be the highest performing, highest reputation Toastmaster club in your community. You might want to be the Toastmaster club of choice in your community. Whatever that high level objective is. And there's no wrong way to put it, but you'll see underneath it, it's the measure of that. So you need to put what the measure would be there. So if you get stuck in writing this, because this is a writing exercise now, so if you get stuck, raise your hand so that the facilitator there can help you, and if you've got a question, we can bring the question to the group. So what are you intending to produce by June the 30th, 2020? And this exercise can be very much an exercise where you talk to one another. You might need some support from somebody near you. So I'm going to talk, but I encourage you, if you need other people to talk to them. So you might be sitting in clubs and want to talk. So what are you intending to produce? And then look at the measurement. So what measurement will you use to know that this objective has been realized? So again, the example, we'll submit achievements that earned us Distinguished Club status with a minimum of 7 out of 10 goals achieved by June 15th. So you want to have the SMART goal written. Okay, so I'm going to assume that you've all decided that you're going to be distinguished or select or presidents next year. And if you've decided that that's not what you want, then my question is, how are you leading? And where are you leading if you don't want to achieve a status in the program that we're part of? Okay, so have a look at that. And don't be afraid to write a stretch goal. Don't play it safe. You can build your club as big as you want, and you can be as fabulous as you want. Hold people to a high standard. So the next, number 2 is the future vision. And this is a writing exercise. And I'm actually going to give you some time to write this. I want you to write it. And this is like writing a journal entry. So I want you to, first of all, before you start writing, I want you to imagine that the date is July 1st, 2020. So your year is over, the coming year is finished, and you're writing in a journal, or you're writing something that you're going to share with people, that you're standing there in the future and the project that you're talking about today is complete. So think about what the energy in your club meeting feels like. What are the emotions that you feel? What is the sense of excitement or celebration? Or is your club going out and having a party to celebrate? What is actually happening that day to celebrate this? What does it feel like? What does it look like? Who's there? So write, and I'll give you about 5 minutes, and don't worry about the details, and don't worry about being grounding it in facts. This is creating your future. You're writing your journal. What are you experiencing in that day? And I'll give you 5 minutes, and then I'm going to get a couple people to come up and actually share what you've written. Can I get a couple of volunteers to come up and read their future vision? Somebody want to volunteer to come up and read your future vision? Come to the front, that'd be great. Thank you. Somebody brave in Kamloops. We'll get somebody in Kelowna.
Okay, we got someone in Kamloops.
Perfect.
Can I start?
Yes.
Okay, fellow Toastmasters in Kamloops and Kelowna, and dear Pat,
Thanks.
our club's vision for the future for 2020 is that we have an event where people are giving engaging speeches. People are clapping because the speeches are good, not because it's Toastmasters tradition. And the meetings are energetic. The event is energetic. The people are recognized for achievements. They also share achievements outside the club, how Toastmasters help them. We have actual food, not just snacks. Healthier food, we can afford it. And we have excitement and enthusiasm, and members bring guests because the speeches are good and they want to listen to speeches, like in TEDx, like in a talk show, not just because somebody told them to do a favor and come to a club. So that's what we see for the next year for our club.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing. And so just to provide just some feedback for the club, if I may, on that future vision. If you write that in present tense, rather than so that if you say it's June the 30th or July 1st, 2020, our club has just achieved whatever the status is, President's Distinguished Status. We're all together celebrating with friends and family and members because we've got a room full of food. We're all excited because we've developed our speaking skills to a new level, working together. We've got a lineup for executive next year. So put it in that moment, right? Instead of it might happen, but I'm actually experiencing it right now. And that's the power of this exercise, is to write it, the experience right there, like it's a done deal. But great work. Thank you. Did you do that by yourself or with your buddies there? Okay, good.
He did it with his buddies.
Yeah, good. Okay, somebody in Kelowna want to share your future vision?
Sentinel speakers from Castlegar, 2852.
Cool.
The group has been in contact monthly, and we have agreed that our hope is to have all our members owning the club. We have spent many hours in communication with each other and have seen quite an enthusiasm with all our members. We have been all signing up for various roles and have completed at least 2 speeches each. Everyone has put their energy into revitalizing our club by finding ways to create excitement. I don't know what that is yet. We have reached the goal of 20 members by asking our members to invite their colleagues, friends, and family. Past executive has walked us through the process and have invited us to ask questions as needed. We are in contact with both our area and district.
Great, good, thank you. And again, if I may, is to make sure that you write it in it's a done deal, right? We've already done this and we're celebrating. Today is you know, really start out the comment or this exercise with, today is July 1st, 2020. We're celebrating the fact that we did all these things. So they're a done deal. Okay. And rightfully so, as you said, you don't have to know how. You don't have to know how now, because what we know is that energetically, when we set a goal and we get committed to that goal, the ways open up. We don't have to know how we're going to get there. It'll unfold as we go along, one step at a time. So create the vision and buy into the power of the vision of what it's actually like to achieve it. What does it feel like to belong to a President's Distinguished Club? And when you can get super passionate and engaged in that, then you're going to have the energy to keep going and find the ways to make it happen. So thank you for sharing the future vision that you have. And really, this is the secret sauce of this whole process. Now, for those of you that like to be super logical and plan and make sure that you can make things happen, the next exercise in this is about what skills you currently have that are useful to the project. So it's looking at, you might have networking skills, you might have web building skills, you might already have great organizing skills. So look at the skills that you have within your club that would support that vision coming true. We have this situation where you're talking about accessing past leaders. So the skill would be networking or access to, right? So give some thought to skills. And talk to people around you also to get some ideas if you're thinking what skills you might have. You might already know how to do the Distinguished Club Plan, might have a great website, might have somebody who's very good with multimedia. Okay, so you've all got some skills that you've identified, and I want to look at the next section, that's resources, because it ties closely with skills. And we want to create a list of the people that you know who would be a resource, and also a list of the places and the things that would be resources for you achieving your goal. So people might be a list of past officers or people you know who would support the club, or who would, it might be your area or division director or the district team, might be past members or people that in your division. Places, it might be the district conference, it might be an area contest, it might be visiting another club would be a place that you might go for inspiration or ideas. So think about where you would get that. It might be, and things might be looking at YouTube of club meetings, or all the resources that there might be that you could access. So things might also be the paperwork, the program that's provided by Toastmasters. So capture those also as resources that are there for you to achieve that envisioned future. The people, the places, and the things that are available to you. And don't negate or say, oh, that person wouldn't. Just put their name down and follow up later. But this is just brainstorming. People, places, and things. Okay, let's move on. So you've had an opportunity to capture resources and skills that you have available for you in your club in order to achieve your envisioned future. So there's many, many things that you have because of all the people and the resources. We live in a rich resource place. So you may think of further things as you take this document away, and feel free to add to them, because sometimes we just don't think of them at the moment. The next category where it talks about rewards, this is part of the process that I use in my coaching when I'm working with individuals, and I ask us to reward ourselves. Now, this may or may not work for your club, but I've included it because I thought maybe some of you will want to use this tool for your own personal life and achievements, and so I wanted to provide it in its fullness. But look at, is there, you know, if you have something to celebrate, do you want to have a celebration in some way? Like, is if you reach distinguished, if you're on your way to be president's distinguished, if you get distinguished status, do you want to have cupcakes at your meeting, or do you want to have you know, horns to make noise, or what you want to do to celebrate? And so that might be something that you would include there, but I won't spend time looking at that right now. We've got about 10 minutes left, and what I want to focus on is the action plan next. And what's, so number 5 is about actually looking at the actions. And so what you do is start at the top of the list is going to be your date of arrival. So if you've set the date as July 1st, 2020, and you've reached President's Distinguished or Distinguished status, or however you want to write that, what the milestone is, and then work backwards from there. So if it's to be to have 20 members and be President's Distinguished with 9 goals achieved on July the 1st, 2020, then you've got, then your next below that might be, you might do this in monthly increments. And I've given you more space if you want to break it down further, but we could use, for example, July the 1st, 2020 would be achieve President's Distinguished 20 members, 20 plus members, however many you have. Then June the 1st, 2020 would be 20 members, 7 goals achieved. And under this, this is just your milestone of what you're aiming for, and then you create every month your action plan as an executive to fulfill that. So you'll see the next category is the actions to be taken under each of those milestones. So then you would just work back the months from July, June, May, April, etc., and write down that, and then look at how you would break down that goal to monthly to where you currently are. Okay, makes sense? So now you've got a milestone each month that you as a club are working towards. And I would suggest that your status, current status, on the dashboard as of June the 30th this year would be your starting point. So you might look at how are you going to get those education goals? How are you, the first things you want to put in those months is the months that you're doing club officer training, which is right now. So those would be ticked off and managed. So that's already a milestone would be in June 2019, trained minimum of trained 5 club officers or trained 7 club officers. Launch a membership drive. And then going then to July, what are you doing in July? Host a, you know, maybe you have a joint meeting and you add 2 more members to your club. So looking at the milestones of what each month is. And then the number 6 is taking those milestones each month as an executive and breaking them down into actions for the next month. So if you want to have, if your milestone for July, or say August 1st, 2019, is to have 20 members. I don't know, it depends on where you are, but say you're going to add 2 members. And so what's your actions under that? Are you going to ask each member to bring a guest? Are you going to have a joint meeting with another club and have a broad invitation to the community? Are you going to go and start and do information talks about the benefits of Toastmasters in other areas? Perhaps you can speak at a community event, whatever it is. So making a plan to deliver the milestone for each of the months. Okay, so does that make sense? Anybody have questions on the process? Feel free to come forward and ask questions on the process. What you want to do then ultimately is set up to somehow have some small recognition of each of the milestones that you achieve, so that you can celebrate and create that club ownership, that every member owns the club and celebrates the successes, and then set the next goal and bring the next goal to the club so that they can set about achieving it. Okay. And then again, if you want to attach rewards to it, for sure do that. So hopefully this project plan and planning backwards from that envisioned rich, exciting future empowers you to break out of doing the same old thing. Think of creative things that you haven't done before, that you've heard somebody else try. Look online, ask online for ideas, try new things, and watch your language to see how often you say, we've always done it this way, or that won't work, or we don't do that. And try something different. Don't do the same thing over again that you've done last year. Maybe if it was successful, repeat it, but add something new to it as well, and see if you get different results. One of the things that I hear a lot of when we look at North America is that we're a tapped out market. We're not. Let's be really clear. I can walk down the street on any given day, and almost every person I meet has never heard of Toastmasters. So we are not tapped out. We are not in a saturated market. And if your club cannot get to the minimum, maybe there isn't a need for your club, right? So look at, is there actually a need for your club in your community? Or is your club have too many, or does your community have too many clubs? So I hope this encourages you to be the leader of yourself in your Toastmaster experience, as well as to lead your clubs to distinguished status or better, to have an excellent program that Toastmasters is known for worldwide, only because the members show up and expect excellence from one another. So I encourage you to set a high standard, to see the highest and best in one another, and encourage your fellow members to achieve that, and lead an excellent group to success and to achieve that future that you envision for you and your club in the future. So I thank you for being part of this and listening to me and sharing your ideas with one another. Thank you for your interaction and your questions, and thank you for sharing your part of your day with me. And I wish I was there to have lunch with you so we could chat and have a good laugh and some fellowship. But I wish you great success in the rest of your day. And as always, I'm always watching the dashboard, and some of you are very close to being over the line this year to be distinguished. So look at that membership, see what you can do in this last week or two to get that membership from 19 to 20 or from 18 to 20, and achieve greatness that you're so capable of doing. So thank you so much, and a special shout out to Carolyn and Michael and Jan and Alan for all, or Alan, Sean for all that you do. Yeah, there's the face. There's the face. Yes. Yeah, I was actually thinking of Alexis, and I'm going, the name is not Alexis. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a fabulously successful year ahead.
Thanks so much, Pat. Thanks for sharing today.
And we can't wait for you to come back, although I'm sure you're enjoying life on the beach in Manitoba.
I am. I'm a beach bum.
Thanks again, Pat. Really appreciate the session.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for asking me. Always happy to contribute. Bye-bye.